Welcome back. We've got another option here from Remington. This is one that I was really excited about when it came out, and especially the re-release, the R51. Originally plagued with problems, this is a current production model. Let's take a look at it and see what makes this thing so different. Coming up next on GBGuns. So we've got a basic but very clean appearing green box. Inside, our owner's manual, the lock, spare magazine, and the gun in a strange oily blue paper thing. Wanted to show you the manual here because Remington actually did a really good job with this manual. They broke down the 10 commandments of firearm safety, which go beyond just the basic 4. Really, it's in-depth enough to make sure, well, it's a good reminder for everyone, but specifically if you're a new shooter, details are covered here. Photographs are nice and clear and full color, well detailed, as are the instructions, which is important because this pistol does not operate like most other guns. It's got a locking block system in it that's kind of cool, which is what makes me so excited about this thing. Let me get the packaging out of the way and we'll take a look at the gun, and then we'll get into field stripping this thing, which is certainly different from most other pistols. So, not to be confused with a Cold War era sci-fi ray gun design, Remington's R51 is a pretty cool little pistol. Now, there was an original that came out decades ago, then they relaunched it, had some issues with that one, they ended up being recalled, and then this is the relaunch. Unfortunate history, but still a pretty cool design. I think it's definitely unique, and of the dozens and dozens of handguns that I own, this is unique in the way that it functions. Let's show clear first and take a look at this thing, and then we'll get into what makes it unique. So up top, that hole there is your loaded chamber indicator. Kind of interesting. You pull the slide back, and we can see that the chamber is clear. Notice that the barrel is not dropping down. There isn't that browning action. That's because this is the Peterson locking block, I believe it's called. Reminds me a lot of an SKS, actually. Magazine release is on both sides. Let's see, is it releasing or ejecting? It's ejecting, which is nice. Pops right out. Now, one thing on these magazines that kind of disappoints me is you do have witness windows on both sides, which is excellent, and on the side, where it's much easier to check than the rear while you're still holding the gun. But the witness windows are midway through. I guess it's full-ish to low-ish. It doesn't really give you a full count. In fact, while I was at the range with this guy, I couldn't remember what the capacity was supposed to be, and these windows didn't really help. But minor complaint. So starting on the business end of the gun, we have this very flat muzzle. You can see that there's quite a bit of slide above the barrel and not so much below, but a little bit of play in the slide frame. Steel sights, we've got a no snag up front and a nice squared off one in the rear that lets you rack off of a table or belt if need be in an emergency. This slopish design here, although visually okay, makes me wonder if they couldn't have brought the dots further back and given you a slightly longer sight radius. The slide itself, very neat design. It's squared off up front, even though there's a lot of roundness here, so it is quite easily pinchable for doing a press check if need be. We don't have rail space, and no texturing on the front of the trigger guard for people who are into that. Doesn't bother me much at all. The front strap, very aggressively, finely checkered, or And you do have these memory points on both sides for resting your trigger finger when you're not on, which is a very nice fit. I do like that they're kind of stylized. The trigger is an interesting setup. This is an aluminum frame and steel slide, by the way. It's an all metal gun, which kind of gives it a nice heft, makes it feel solid in the hand. Trigger, first off, you do have a grip safety that has to be engaged, but the trigger is actually really nice. Watch this. You have a little take up to a wall and break. Very little travel. Reset. There. Fires again. It's actually a really enjoyable trigger. Continuing along, we've got our slide lock / slide release. Well within reach of my hands. Trigger guard has a slight undercut to it that works, lets even my large hands fit on the gun rather nicely. Some removable and changeable grip panels here. They do have them in G10 and in wood. Kind of neat, nice looking. Maybe something you want to jump on before this gun disappears into obscurity. Along the back, no texturing on this long grip safety. Slide to frame in the rear is pretty solid. There's our sight picture, nice and clear 3-dot sight system. They do have night sights available for these things. Rear sight is driftable for adjustments. And on the right side of the gun, we have our magazine release for lefties or folks like myself that like to use their middle finger. Overall, a pretty neat looking gun. Very different, very ray gun-esque. Let's field strip this thing. Having originally watched the Military Arms channel video on this pistol, because of course I was really intrigued when it came out, I was a bit intimidated about field stripping. It's different. I wouldn't say that it's impossible or super difficult. So we have to start by bringing the slide back to about there. See there's a little takedown notch spot there. Hold that in place. In fact, these grooves on the barrel here are so you can grab onto the barrel, which is something you need to do later on. And you got to push that pin there. Now that pin is flush, so sometimes a little helper can be valuable, but if you dig your finger in there, it's not that bad. And then pry up or pull this thing out the rest of the way, which of course happens very easily when you're not trying to film, but once you're filming it gets a little difficult. There we go. So that pops right out. Then we grab onto the grooves of the barrel here and hold. And it does require some finger strength. And you can pull the slide right off once it wants to. It's locked in place. There we go. Not sure how it locked there, but slide comes right off without having to squeeze the trigger. Taking a look inside here, we'd have an all aluminum frame that's very simple. Do see a bit of wear there already happening. Now I have shot this one already. It's plus P rated, but not sure about things. And a great point that Tim pointed out on Military Arms channel is that the locking block, which is steel, rests on that ledge there, which is aluminum. And so that gets slammed. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. Our ejector is not pinned. That does lead to some complications while reassembling. And we can see our hammer, because this is hammer fired, that's how you get such a great trigger. Something of note, by the way, is it says not to dry fire this with the slide removed, and that's of course because you have a steel hammer and aluminum frame. So with the barrel in its position, which you're not supposed to let go of it, the locking block can be removed. I let go of it so I can show you the frame. if you do get to this point and you're wondering how do I get that barrel back forward, you've got to push on the barrel here, which doesn't feel the greatest on your hands, but guess what? You've got a magazine, which is much firmer and harder than your skin. Get the barrel forward a bit, and now we can get our block out once it wants to cooperate. There we go. So I had to go off camera for a second so that I could push that barrel ledge onto the table. There's our locking block. Now we can release that, let the barrel go back, and this is another challenging spot to get the barrel out. You've got to pull this collar forward, and there's actually a little detent mark in there somewhere that holds it in place. It's not the easiest thing to do. Once again, what works for me is using the edge of the table to push on this lug of the barrel to get the barrel forward, pinching that spot to hold it, then holding the collar back and bringing the barrel out. I'll show you what I mean. So off camera, I'm pushing on the edge of that barrel. So I can get it forward. Gotta keep that collar in place, which you don't really have much to hold on to get it there. But there is a point where it kind of locks, and then the barrel can come out the back. Now the collar can also be removed if need be. I don't see a real reason for it, so I'm just going to leave it here, because then you have to realign the spring with the slide, which is problematic as well. So taking a look at our manufacturing, we can see that it's a nice and clear and clean, minimal tooling marks. Everything looks very nicely done, which for new tooling, new gun, you would expect. Here's our locking block. That's actually the tail end of the firing pin. It's spring loaded to prevent slam fires, which is nice. You can see the external extractor. This is the part that really reminds me of the SKS, having this locking block on the rear. I'm sure some of you who know firearm systems better than I do can correct me on that, but that's what it looks like to me. Our barrel, we've got a rather narrow but long feed ramp. This is rated for +P. Let's see what our chamber support looks like. As always with our nozzler match. Dropping around in there, and you can see it's fully supported, which is good for +P. I would be a little afraid if it wasn't. But the barrel itself feels pretty small, I think mostly because this section here is so much shorter than your standard 9mm handgun. So that's field stripping and taking a look at the construction. Overall, I think it's a neat looking gun, nicely designed, a little complicated for field stripping. Reassembly is the reversal, and a bit more complicated just because there's plenty of frustration points. Normally I don't reassemble on camera. I'm going to go through it for you on this thing just because it can be a bit of a bear. Speaking of bear with me while I get this thing back together. Not the easiest thing, not for the faint of heart, and it does require some finger strength because you've got to be able to pinch this barrel just like I did in field stripping and hold on to these friction points here, these grooves, fighting the spring strength. Okay, to reassemble, we're going to grab our slide and put our barrel back in. Now, a challenge with this is, of course, that the barrel is only going to protrude through the slide when it's all the way in like that. You gotta make sure things are lined up, which can be a bit of a challenge. I'm not sure what makes this work sometimes and not, but that takes some fidgeting. What I've done in the past is used a pen or something to be able to apply some downward pressure there so that everything lines up. There we go. We're going to push on that barrel, get that sticking out again, and hold on to those grip points so that we can get our locking block back in. Once that's in, you can let it go forward. Now notice that the barrel doesn't have a set resting spot that has this completely aligned. By that I mean it's got to be vertical like that. We now have our slide back together. Wasn't too terrible, but you are going to have to pinch on that end again to get things back on the frame. And a point of note on the frame is with this ejector not pinned and it easiest to install upside down, your ejector is going to be sticking out like that. So it's just something to keep an eye on as you put it all back together. Once again, I'm going to use the edge of the table to push that barrel out so I can grab onto it. And my fingers are a bit raw from working on this guy. So pinching the barrel, let's start our rear rails. And you notice, of course, that the barrel wants to protrude. You tuck that in. Got it all lined up. And we bring this back to its alignment spot. And replace our pin. Not quite. So I just had to pull the pin out a little bit and realign it. And we can do our functions check. And everything works just fine. So it's not terrible, but it's certainly not easy. And you might get some raw fingers on it. It does require some hand strength to do. We call it a pain of passion for having a gun that's slightly different, and it's probably going to be one for the history books in one way or another. We'll get this out to the range. In fact, I've already had it out there. I'm not going to tell you how it did though. Try our full mag +1, the what's for dinner test, with a variety of different loads, all the way up to 165 grain, all the way down to 65 grain, and then a quick grouping from 7 yards with a 115 grain nozzler to see how it does. Let me know your thoughts on this thing. I think it's cool looking. I appreciate having that different locking style, having a relatively fixed barrel position. Potentially talks about some great accuracy, and the trigger's really nice. It feels pretty good in the hand. I did end up with some ergonomic notes, if you will, things that just didn't work with my hand size. That will be discussed in the shooting impressions video. That covers the R51 for the tabletop. See you out on the range for the shooting impressions. Thanks for watching.